Hello everybody and welcome to a lecture on invertebrate zoology. As requested, I am going to go through a chapter of this book more slowly, my zoology book. So a quick introduction to zoology. Zoology is the scientific study of animals. More specifically, it's the study of the behavior, structure, physiology, classification, and distribution of animals. It incorporates pretty much every biological science. And to start with, one of the things that zoology focuses on is classification and taxonomy of species. Classification, basically animals are put into taxonomic groups based on similar evolutionary history and characteristics such as development, reproduction, and such. Phylogenetic trees or cladograms kind of show more of how they relate to extinct species and common evolutionary traits and common evolutionary ancestors. So that's what this chapter is about. So this is an example of what a cladogram looks like, and it just shows the branching off, the similarities of the different taxonomic groups and dissimilarities that enable scientists to categorize different species. This shows branching of different species from common ancestors and how they branched off. And scientists can use genetics to do that. This shows some DNA sequences that they might use. And the 5 main taxonomic groups, or the 5 kingdoms that living creatures are organized into, right here. And you start with the bacteria, single-celled organisms, living, protista, protists, some of them single-celled, many of them are algal, so they photosynthesize. And then you have your plants, fungi, and your Animalia. So we're going to be looking at Kingdom Animalia. More specifically, Kingdom Animalia is broken up into 2 main groups, vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates include phylum Chordata or chordate. They have a backbone, and it encompasses reptiles, fish, mammals, amphibians, and birds. The invertebrates are actually more diverse, and they have several different phylums. So in this book it starts with the protozoans, the protists, not quite animals, not quite plants, kind of a kingdom of their own. So we're not really going to look at these, but I'll just flip through this. It includes amoebas, some of the plankton, dinoflagellates, radiolorans. Dinoflagellates are plankton that are responsible for the red tide. Some of the species also have symbiotic relationships with reefs. Here's a couple examples here. And then you start with the invertebrate groups. And you kind of start with the most primitive groups, which include phylum Porifera, which are the sponges. And when I say that they're the most primitive, they're the most underdeveloped as far as their structures go. And they're classified together. They have similar feeding structures, which is pretty much just pores that water comes in and out, and they filter feed. They don't really have a nervous system or advanced digestion, so they're pretty basic. These are just characteristics of, actually we're into radiate animals, phylum Cnidaria and Ctenophora, and those include anemones and corals, hydrozoans, and jellyfish. They all have very similar larval stages. Now some of them become sessile and some of them remain planktonic or pelagic and float through the open ocean. So these are just some examples of hydrozoans and jellies. So jellies have nerve receptors, but they don't have any kind of centralized nervous system. They're also pretty primitive, but I think they're pretty neat. Then we'll flip through to acoelomate bilateral animals. And acoelomate just refers to the type of body cavity it has. We're now starting to get into more advanced invertebrates, and a lot of the parasitic worms are in these phylums. Kind of freaky. Here's a cladogram, just kind of a phylogenetic tree, and it shows the similarities and dissimilarities. These are what all of them have in common. Then these branch off, and this is what they have in common, etc., etc. That's how those trees kind of work. That's how you read them. Pseudocoelomate, and these also include roundworms, heartworms, more parasitic worms and such. And then you get to the invertebrates I'm focusing on today, and that's the mollusks. So, mollusks fall between the parasitic and the segmented worms as far as development goes. And they're broken down further into classes. I'm going to focus on 3 classes in particular, and that's gastropods, bivalves, and cephalopods. And I have some cool examples of all of the above. So here's a few pictures of mollusks. You have a chitin, a top shell snail, a nudibranch, which is a naked slug, sea slug. They're really cool. A giant clam, and an octopus. All of these are mollusks. So mollusks are all grouped together because of these similarities. And these similarities include a ventral body wall that specializes as a muscular foot. It's used in locomotion. Dorsal body wall that forms a mantle cavity. It can be modified into gills and lungs, and it also secretes the animal's shell. They have sensory nerve endings on the surface, and they actually have ganglia. Some of them have centralized nervous systems, the cephalopods do. The body cavity is limited mainly to the area around the heart. They do have complex digestion, 1 or 2 kidneys. Their gas exchange is through gills, lungs, or mantles. They have sensory organs and open circulatory systems. So here's the different classes that they're further grouped into. And class Gastropod. These are univalve shells. Here's an example that I'll show later, but this actually has a living snail in it when it's alive. And what makes the gastropods similar is an effect of torsion, which means that their body twists as they grow. They have well-developed heads. They have teeth. They have gills and trochophore larvae, which means their larva is planktonic. Gastropods can be marine, freshwater, or terrestrial, so it encompasses your terrestrial snails and slugs. And they can be herbivores, scavengers, or carnivores. So I actually have a diagram of the inside of what that shell would look like. So as you see, the little creature inside this shell is pretty developed. A lot of people don't know. Now, their digestive system obviously isn't like ours, but they do have a stomach and a digestive gland that secretes enzymes. They have a gill, an eye, a mouth. They have ganglia, which basically is a type of neuron, and so they're able to transmit through their nerve cord to their neurons. That's not a centralized nervous system, but it's starting to get pretty developed. Here's the foot that most mollusks have, and they can use that to move. So it's pretty cool. And the next class to talk about, this is just another diagram of the inside of a gastropod. Class Bivalvia. So the bivalve basically means two valves or two shells. So that includes your mussels, scallops, clams, oysters, etc. They have reduced heads, no teeth. They filter water, and they're actually really important for the ecosystems they live in because of their ability to filter pollutants out of their water using their lamellibranchiate gills. They also have trochophore larvae, and they can be found in fresh marine and brackish water. So, the inside of a bivalve, they don't have teeth. They use a siphon to pull water in and then excrete it after it runs across this is their lamellibranchiate gills. They also have kidney and a heart, digestive gland and stomach, and their foot. And bivalves have byssal threads that they're able to use to attach to hard substances. I don't know if you've ever seen oysters stuck to rocks, but they're on there pretty good, and they use their byssal thread to become sessile, and then they just let the water kind of move through them and they filter it. And that's really great for marshes and such with high productivity, and it keeps the pollutants low. They also have the ability to bore into things. Their byssal threads can be very strong. They can bore into shipwood, into sand, into rocks even. There's a clam that can do that. And these are just some pictures of mollusks. This is a terrestrial gastropod, terrestrial snail, a nudibranch, mussels, scallops, clam. And they're pretty cool. And this shows the siphons that they stick out and use to filter the water. And this is the inside, another picture. And now we come to class Cephalopoda. Cephalization actually means centralized to form a brain or a head. So cephalopods have very developed brain and nervous systems. They have eyes. They're very intelligent. There's a documentary by Nova on PBS, which you can actually find on Netflix. It's called How Smart Are Animals, and there's an octopus featured on it, and she actually can figure out how to open up a bottle to get something that she wants out of it. So as primitive and underdeveloped as invertebrates seem, they actually can be very intelligent. So cephalopods include the nautilus, cuttlefish, squid, and octopus. And here's a picture of the inside of different parts of the octopus. And octo means 8, it has 8 legs. Squid are in order decapod, they have 10. 2 large eyes. This is his body sac. His heart and everything are in there. His digestive tract. His mouth is down here. So, there's your cephalopod. And it shows the inside of a squid and all of his little complex body parts. And here's an example of an ancestral mollusk branching off into the different classes, and the thicker the line, the more diverse the group. So gastropods and bivalves, there's a lot of different species. And then this is a cladogram, and this is a pretty cool example of what all of them have in common from here on, and then this is from here on and from here on, and this is just an example. Similarities and dissimilarities of mollusks. So that's just one chapter in my zoology book. And now I want to talk about shells. I have a few shells here to identify. Shells, as I noted before, are made by the mollusk's mantle. Now, mollusks actually have excess calcium in their blood. They're able to secrete it and deposit it along their mantle, crystallize it using proteins in different ways. So you have different levels of thickness and colors, and there's 3 different layers to it. Shell, and they're mostly calcium carbonate. They are varying and very beautiful to look at. So I have this seashell guide, Seashells of the World. It's actually, my grandpa gave this to me many years ago. And I have a few, really some of my favorite shells that I would like to identify. So in my identification of these shells, if I misidentify one, feel free to let me know. I did my best. Some of them are very similar. So I'll start with one of my favorite, the commercial trochus, and then this is what it looks like. It's so beautiful, I think. The different layers, the pink coloring. It's amazing to think that the animal itself produced such a beautifully decorated shell. So I think this one is really cool. Another top shell that I have that is also really cool is the West Indian top shell. And this is what this one looks like. This one's a little bigger. But that's not marker, that's actually part of the shell. I know it's kind of hard to believe. It looks kind of like it's been painted. But this one's really shiny and lovely. Another shell that I really like is this green turban shell. This is what that looks like. And this one's kind of thick, and it's got big ridges in it. Interesting fact, buttons are actually made from these shells. The inside's kind of shiny. Now, the 3 shells I've shown you so far are from the Indo-Pacific region. In fact, most of the shells I'll show you today are from that area. That's this shell. The next shell that I have is actually related to the periwinkles, which are marsh snails. The Turritella snail. And this little guy actually is really cool. He burrows in the sand, in the marshes, in the muddy water. But it's long and thin. And this one also has ridges in it. But this one is really cool. And then also this one is kind of smooth. And this is a cowrie. I believe it's a tiger cowrie. So this is kind of what it looked like to me. But see, some of them are so similar that it's really difficult to tell. I do know it came from the Indo-Pacific, so that was my best guess. Like I said, if that's incorrect, please let me know nicely. So that one's really, and these are really popular. They actually used to be used as money, as a form of bartering. Very popular in the different regions they're from. And then I have this pretty little delicate snail. It's a bonnet. And I believe it's a Japanese bonnet. So I'll flip to the page that's on. And this is what it looked like to me. It's this one right here. So that's what I identified it as. This one's pretty smooth, but it's actually, if you can hear, this one's a lot thinner than some of the other ones. This guy right here, he's from the Caribbean. And this is a Murex snail, pink mouthed. Look how beautiful that is. This is a predator. This guy. You actually can see some barnacles encrusted on it going along for a free ride. And this one's really, really pointy. And I'll show you the different Murex snails. In particular, this one. Something interesting, the Phoenicians actually used to use one of the types of Murex to make royal purple dye. They were the first to utilize something from nature to make dye. So that's pretty interesting. They're actually one of the first seafaring cultures and cataloged several different ocean species, marine species. That's pretty cool. He's awesome. And I really like this one. This one is almost like a paper lantern. Hence the name Papery Rapa or Rappa. You can hear and see how thin it is. Very delicate. And I found him in the book. Right here with the rapid coral snails. So it's closely associated with corals. And the last gastropod that I have, I believe it's a leopard cone. So here's the cone snails. They can actually inflict fatal stings. And I believe it's this leopard cone. I think that's what this big hunk of shell is. And this is thick and heavy. And it looks like part of it's been worn down, which happens very quickly once the animal dies, and so it's difficult to find shells really intact like this. So those are the gastropod examples that I have, and I have 2 bivalve examples. As I noted before, bivalves are really important to the ecosystem because they filter out the water. So my first example that I have is this fluted giant clam. It can be between 3 to 12 inches. The one that I have is young, but the inside of it's so pretty. And this is the freshest part of the shell. So actually when a pearl is formed, this part of the shell is made around either an irritant that got into the shell, or it's a piece of misplaced mantle that starts secreting this kind of substance, and that forms your pearls. So that's kind of interesting. A giant clam can actually produce a pearl the size of a golf ball. That's pretty impressive. What a beautiful creation. And this is a quahog clam, one of the most successful. This is actually from the Atlantic Ocean, and it's really common. In fact, if you ever go to a beach on the Atlantic Ocean and you collect shells, you're probably going to encounter one of these. And in the book, I found this one on page right here. So it's a quahog, or a type of Venus clam. So that's it for my shell identification. It's important not to let shells, to let these animals diminish. They're important to the ecosystem. So if you're going to eat them, if you're going to eat bivalves, make sure it's from a sustainable seafood source. It's important not to let them diminish. When collecting shells, do not remove any with living creatures in them. And remember that some other species of animals will utilize these shells, so it's not really great to take too many of them. For instance, I was in the Bahamas once and I collected it. I took a few shells back to my room, and I got out of the shower and 2 of them were walking across the table. Kind of funny. They were being utilized by hermit crabs, and I hadn't noticed, so I put them back. Now, seashells can contribute to sand color. Sand is mostly weathered rock, but in areas where seashells, especially colorful ones, are prevalent, they can contribute to the sand content because they're calcium carbonate and they break down into a really soft sand substance. There are beaches in the Caribbean with pinkish sand because of the many different pink species of shells. Parrotfish can also excrete up to a ton of sand in a year, a ton. They eat algae off of coral, which is also calcium carbonate, and then they excrete it, and so they actually accidentally ingest some of the coral, and it just comes out and produces sand, so that's pretty cool too. So that's it for shells, and I just wanted to show one more example that I had. National Geographic just has the best of pictures. And I remembered this article about nudibranchs that I saw, which is a type of gastropod. And the colors are just so beautiful. Toxic nudibranchs, soft seagoing slugs, produce a brilliant defense. So they're actually toxic when ingested. I'm sure most of you know that bright colored animals are a symbol of toxicity to their predators. He's pretty cool. He can fold his appendages in and swim like an eel to escape danger. He's so neat looking. And this shows the gills, the foot. Look at this. This is so cool. These are just several different nudibranchs. Look at the variation in their colors. This one kind of looks like an Oreo to me. I don't even think I could choose a favorite if I had to. They're all so interesting looking. Ah, toxic snack. That's what it says. This guy's pretty cool too. Feeding on a sponge. It's mostly what they eat. A hard body and thick skin help armor against predators. Any that persist learn that the sponge eater also exudes a toxin. This guy's pretty cool. He's actually camouflaged. This little shrimp is just crawling right over him and doesn't even notice, but that's okay because the nudibranch will not eat him. They don't know if it's a symbiotic relationship. I think they go on to say one of many nudibranch puzzles yet to be solved. So that's it for mollusks. I hope that you learned something and were also able to relax. As I've noted before on my channel, I intend on doing a lecture on arthropods, which includes insects, spiders, and crustaceans. But if there's a particular group of animals or any living creature that you'd like to learn more about, keep the requests coming because I'd be happy to delve into that for you and just let me know. Thanks, guys.